Hello, hello. Welcome. I am Jen from Nearing Wild. I am so happy that you're here with me today. I have been off for a few days because I was sick. I was a little bit under the weather, and you might hear it in my voice, but I am good. I am back. I am healthy. And I am so excited because I have a little bit of a surprise, something that I haven't done before, and I'm super excited about, which is, if you're watching, you probably see I have a guest, and I am just over the moon about this. My very first guest. I have been thinking about having a guest for a little while, and it never felt right until now. So please welcome Andrea Coombs. She is an astrologer who works with her clients to move towards self-mastery, soul ascension, and business connection. I love that. Welcome.
Jen, it's so good to be here. I feel so honored to be the first person to join you. And I'm just so excited about our time together. It's going to be just a beautiful experience. So I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you. I am so excited that it's you to start this out because, like I said, I've been thinking about having guests on the podcast, but it just never felt right. And I guess I want to talk a little bit about why this feels right, because Nearing Wild is all about self-development and aligning back to our soul self and our wild self. And in doing that, I talk about removing the conditioning, the programming, the wounding, and all of that stuff. And in order to discover who that is, and astrology has been such a great tool for me in the whole process. So once we connected, I was like, okay, we went pretty deep into talking about all of, the conditioning and the programming, which we will get into. And I was like, oh, this makes sense. This is aligning. I wanted to have someone who really knew their shit. And that is you. So I'm so excited to have you here. So thank you.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Yeah. Our conversations have just been so amazing, and I have enjoyed them so thoroughly. And I do agree, like, astrology really supports so much of what you do. And it's something that literally changed the path that I was on in my life. And when we've had these conversations and we talk about, like, the programming and the conditioning and things, it's really hard to find yourself again with all of that having taken place within your life, and just feeling, the feeling of being lost. It's really hard to navigate your way out of that. And the work that you do in helping others to come home to themselves and to come to a place where they are able to come back to the authentic self that they are, that they've always been, but kind of along the way, got lost. And astrology supports that work for sure. And
Yeah.
that's where I really found clarity. I found a lot of clarity of myself through my natal chart and through the blueprint of the way that the planets and the stars aligned to the moment I took my first breath, and it is the original story, right? It's the original blueprint of our makeup and our journey and our identity and why we're here and what we're meant to do with this, gift of being in the human body for a period of time.
Yeah. I love that. There are The one common thing that I always hear is people are like, I want to get to know who my authentic self is, who my soul is, and I want to break through the conditioning, but how? There's so many different ways to do it. And there's like just an overwhelming amount of information of do this, don't do that. But astrology, I love that you said, like, it's literally a blueprint. Like, this is a tool that has been helpful for me. Um, but, and that we will get into that, but I want to know how you got into astrology in general. Like, bring me back to when that all began.
Yeah. So I was the teenager who was obsessed with like all of the esoteric shops and tarot and crystals and the, psychic on the corner. I grew up in New York. So, I was always just so enchanted with the spiritual tools that were available. And it was nowhere in my family. No one spoke about astrology or, the tarot or anything like that. It was just something very like deeply innate in me to be drawn to it. So from a young age, I just read all the books, and I spoke to people who actually did the practices and things like that. And just it was always there, right? So all the modalities, there was always this connection to the modalities that we have available to go into self-discovery with. And I would say that where I knew I needed it the most, and where the deeper connection came, and where I figured out like this is my path, is to bring others onto this journey, is as an adult, I have felt so completely lost, so completely disconnected. I felt as though I was this puzzle that I could not figure out and I could not solve. And I would read my astrology in the books, and I would be this fiery, I'm a double fire, so like I'm an Aries sun, I'm a Leo rising, and then I'm a Scorpio moon, right? So that sounds like, okay, well, what does all that mean? But basically fire is like very passionate, very innovative, bold, warrior like, and a Leo is very like up up on the stage, ready to get out there and speak and be seen, and to also entertain and things like that. And I thought to myself, gosh, I don't feel anything like that. Why? Like, why don't I? And it goes back for me to childhood. So I was a very animated child. I was very emotional. I was very expressive, and I was not well received in my household for being those things, right? So I learned very early on, the conditioning comes in, right? To quiet down, to tone it down, because I was always told you're too much, too much, too much, to this, to that, too emotional, too, sensitive, too da 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 da. And so I just learned to fit into where I was being raised, to just squash it all. And I didn't even know that that's what it was until many years later, doing it my natal chart and really seeing the blueprint and understanding, like, no, like, to the core, that child was my path. That child was who I was meant to be. I had to let that go to survive in the circumstances that I was in. But in adulthood, I no longer need to do that, right? It becomes all of a sudden this epiphany where you're like, hold on, like, I don't have to be quiet anymore, or I don't have to be invisible and not make noise. And I don't have to do the things that were required for me to fit into the family that I was raised in. And I'm not saying that all things that happen in childhood are negative. Like, it all is for a reason, right? Like, it all puts us on the path of wherever we're supposed to go and what our evolutionary process for our lives here is. But I just knew it didn't fit. And I knew for me, it didn't feel right. And as I started to look at my blueprint and I really started to understand the dynamics, because it goes so much deeper than the sun sign. It goes so much deeper than the rising sign. It's a whole chart that tells a story. And as I learned that story, I started using the tools that also you will use in what you do with your clients, to start to let go of that conditioning and to start to embrace myself as I am and as I'm meant to be in this journey here. And as I took my first breath and the stars and the planets said, this is who you'll be, that's what I'm moving back to. And it's a journey every day. It's a journey every day to work and be that. But to do that, I know that I'm living so much more joyfully. I know that I'm living so much more in alignment. My life has greater satisfaction in everything that I do. So it's worth the work. But you have to have a place to start. And that's what I feel astrology gives you. It gives you a place to start, to have a very deeper connection and knowing of your story, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That was a long answer.
No, I love that. And I do think it's such a great tool, like blueprint, literally,
Yeah.
like you say, that shows you so many people, and I will say actually for myself, I used to deny my sun sign. Like I had so much shame around it because there's conditioning, there are beliefs in the world. There are some signs where people are saying like, I do not like this sign, we
Mhm.
don't get along. I'm a Gemini. There are a lot of beliefs about Gemini, and I denied this part of me. I would push it down. I would pretend that it was not a part of me since I was so young that I didn't even realize I was doing that. You know, I was shamed for who I was in a lot of ways. So I was like, that's not me. I'd push it away. And which is exactly what you're saying. Once I started to see my blueprint and why I was the way I was, that it actually is me, and it's my uniqueness. It's actually a good thing. That's when I was like, oh, okay. It was actually more the conditioning and more what I was told that pushed me away from that. So I know that a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of people who feel like I am not like my sun sign. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So first I want to go back just for a second and say there are no bad signs. Like
Right.
that is definitely something that anytime I'm with a client and they say, oh, I'm a Scorpio, I'm like doomed. I'm like, no, you're not. Like there's so many beautiful aspects to every sign. So there is no bad sign. There is only what you're meant to get from each sign and what you're meant to express from each sign. So I want to like squash that right away because I hear it all the time.
Mm.
And I also hear all the time what you just asked, which is why don't I feel in alignment with my sun sign, or why don't I feel alignment with my chart? Mostly the sun sign is what I hear because people don't really know their chart that well. Um, and there's a few reasons. One thing is there's an evolutionary process to astrology as well. So astrology is broken into many different modalities. There's like evolutionary astrology, modern astrology, traditional, like there's all different ways to practice astrology. And I do a combination of traditional astrology with a decent amount of evolutionary study as well, and modern to a bit, but I'm kind of heavily into the traditional aspect. And with the evolutionary perspective, sometimes there's a few things. I want to give you a few reasons, but first and foremost, sometimes you're growing into your sun sign. So it's a journey and process through your life to actually kind of embrace the traits of the sign. So for you, where you are in your life now, you're ready to embrace the Gemini trait of being the communicator, being the connector, being someone who shares information, being someone that needs to see everything, needs to, like, really literally is born to talk and listen. Like, that's your thing, right? But as a child, you may have talked too much, and maybe mom or dad or whoever was in the household was like, oh my god, Jen, can you just give me 5 minutes? And so you started to learn, ooh, this must be an annoying trait, right? So one is either it's the conditioning of, you know, as you were growing up, the parental influences in the household kind of brought that ability to embrace the sun sign, like kind of like squashed it and took it away a bit, right? So it's the journey coming back. For some people, they really literally have to learn to be it. So
Mm.
it can be you're meant to be the communicator, you're meant to be someone who's talkative, but you need to learn in this lifetime how to do that. And
Mm.
that is going to be the evolutionary process, and the journey that you're on is to really fully embrace your natural ability and innate ability to be the communicator, to be the connector, to be someone who talks and listens and is there for others, right? And
Yeah.
for me, I'm an Aries. So the evolutionary process of an Aries, like I didn't feel Aries. When I look back as a kid, I definitely was super passionate, super warrior, like would argue about my point of view at like 5. You know what I mean? But I am here on this journey to evolve into someone who has and builds a high level of courage, right? So we also like don't we have to look deeper into like what is the sign, like not only is it what its traits, but like what is it here to teach us? So
Mm.
for an Aries, the evolutionary process here is to be taught how to like be warrior like, and how to have courage and how to be passionate and be okay even if it's against status quo. So two things. One would be that you're evolving into it, and it's going to be a process, right? And it's going to be the journey of trial and error, like what fits, what doesn't. Two would be the parental influence that I spoke about, being raised in a household where maybe the elements were completely different than what you were. So the signs have elements. We think we've all kind of heard fire, water, earth, and air, right? So if you're a fire person and you're raised in a household with earth, fire is very masculine, it's very extroverted, and earth is very feminine and very introverted. So in a household where a parent maybe was that Taurus and you're that Aries, you're going to drive them crazy because they just want to go in. Taurus wants to be very mellow, very comfortable, everything kind of very easy, where the fire personality like myself and Aries will be like, let's go, what are we creating? I'm a starter, what do you want to start? Like, let's go do this, let's go do that. So
Yeah.
there's that gets taken away. And then there's two more things, and I know I'm going long, but I want to put them in there. There's something called a stellium, and a stellium is in the chart when there is a collection of planets in one sign. So you have a stellium in your chart actually, but it's in Gemini. It's in your actual sun sign. Your sun is part of your stellium. So you have actually a very heavily influenced Gemini presence and experience. For some people, their sun sign might be in Pisces, but they have a stellium in Aries. So they're coming across more Aries than they are actually Pisces. And that's because there's a dominance of Aries in their chart. So they actually are more Aries-like. So a stellium will contribute to you feeling disconnected.
Is a stellium the having multiple, like you just look at the chart and you see okay, there's like
so the chart is it's a circular like almost like a pie charts, and there's 12 houses in the chart, and the planets get placed based on your birth time, location, so longitude, latitude. They get placed into different areas of the chart, and sometimes there can be 3 or more planets in just one house in one sign, and that's what the stellium is. So that's why there's a dominance of energy of whatever that sign is for you, versus if you just have the sun in, like, it's the only Pisces you have, and it's in the house by itself, you're not going to have a full expression of Pisces, because Aries is really dominating maybe the way you communicate, the way that you feel. Like if your moon is in there, your Mercury is in there, and also say Mars, how you take action, you're going to come across more Aries like. And then the last thing, which is something that you would learn from having your chart professionally read. All this you would probably more so find out having your chart professionally read, but is something called sec light. And that is if you were born in the day or you were born at night. So if you're born in the day, your sun sign is going to be more of the dominant presence in your life. But if you're born at night, the moon might actually be more dominant in the presence in your life. So like I'm an Aries sun and I'm a Scorpio moon, but I'm a day chart, so my Aries is stronger than my Scorpio. But if I was born at nighttime, after the sun sets, that's when the night chart begins. I may have more of a Scorpio-like presence, and I may feel more Scorpio because that's my dominant sect. So that's a long answer, but those are there's so many reasons, and I want people to understand that because so many people feel so disconnected from their sun sign and they don't see themselves in it.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I love at the beginning, the things that you were saying, it was making so much sense of the fact that most of us are not raised according to our design, I'll say, like according to the way that we're supposed to be living, because you can only raise someone the way that you've learned to be raised, really, right? And the second point that you were making too reminds me of how what I learned about Gemini is, and what I think a lot of people learn about the different signs that might have negative beliefs or negative connotations around them, is that there are light and dark to all the signs, right? So I think everyone will hold on to the dark of every sign, and that's what they judge based off of. So can you tell me a little bit more about the light and dark and how that plays out?
So I would say that there's probably many different theories on that for sure. My own and how I work with my clients is, so in life, right? We have highs and lows, we have light and dark, right? We have all of these things that shape our experience. If we only had one, we would never grow, right? So like if everything was happy and good all the time, we really would be kind of flat because there wouldn't be these experiences that shape and kind of challenge you to step up and to experience different sides of yourself, right? So I look at the light and the shadow as the shadow is actually what challenges you to go deeper into the light, right? So it's what actually it takes you to the place of deeper knowing, because there is no perfection, nothing is perfect, right? We have to have um at times things go wrong, because if we don't, it would also be very boring, right? So when I look at somebody who says like Aries tends to be very aggressive, and it's like, okay, well, how does that aggression help in life? Where does being aggressive help in life? And then we navigate that. Like sometimes we have to speak up for ourselves, sometimes we're being shut down and it's not actually fair, or it's not actually okay, and we need that aggressive energy to move and propel ourselves forward, right? So I look at the shadow as almost sometimes the tools that we need to get ourselves movement, to get ourselves going. So when I look at say Scorpio for an example, Scorpio is known to like shut you down. It's very protective, it's very protective energy. And I look at it as, because I have that in me, I look at it as it's how I filter who to put my time in with and who not to put my time in with. Where do I invest? Where don't I invest? I use that. So I believe we look at it, and instead of feeling bad about it, we say, what can I do with this? How can I make this work for me? Where in my life do I need this energy? So I look at shadow and light differently than saying like these are the negative traits and these are the positive traits. I look at them as these are like the tools that aren't popular, because we have been told like don't be aggressive, we don't want to piss anybody off, like I look at it as, well, okay, well, where can we actually use that? So for you, like for a Gemini, it's kind of like the talkative part. People are like, oh my god, or Gemini sometimes can talk a little too much, maybe gossipy, like things like that. It's like, okay, but where can you positively share information, and where can you bring out information that others don't want maybe necessarily brought out, but it's really important that it is. Do you know what I'm saying? Does
Yeah.
that
A
make
lot
sense?
of my like connection to that is like I'm a truth seer and a truth bringer. So sometimes
Not popular
I don't
sometimes.
want to hear that. Sometimes people are like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
But I'm like, that's who I am. That's what I do. I do pick and choose that. And then also with Gemini is like the two sides of one coin. Like it's the duality too, right?
Twins, the duo, two sides. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we're taught like to be very like one dimensional at times, so there's not necessarily a very warm welcoming to that part of your personality. But
Yeah.
I look at the shadows as like, how can we work with them, how can we make them work for our life, and how can we lean into them when necessary? That's how I tend to.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so many people, it's natural to, especially when you hear the word shadow or anything, you have to feel and move through those things, right?
Yeah.
Depending on like the aspect that you're looking at. And people kind of get scared with that. People get a little afraid and they're like, no, I want to live in the light, like joy, positivity,
Yeah.
and that I want to be happy. So focus on that. But exactly what you're saying, like there's two sides, duality. You can't experience the joy and the light without integrating shadow aspects. And I love the way that you explain that it's like, okay, how can we use this? Like if this is an aspect of your sign, how can you use that in the world? Like, how is that your gift? I love that.
And when I was learning shadow work, one of the points that were brought up when I was learning it is that usually like when you have a trigger of your shadow, it's like because you see that trait in someone else and you don't like that, you don't like that trait, right? And so you immediately get triggered by it because you're kind of seeing yourself in someone else. And I think that it's kind of it's a similar thing. It's like you have to go deeper and you have to ask, like, what don't you like about that? Why is that something that you feel as though is not acceptable or is not embraceable or is not, welcomed, and I think that that's what I try to do. Like, if a sign is more willful, it's like, well, being willful is not, there's not always negative to be willful. It's like, how can you use being willful? How can you
Mm.
use that strength? How can you go after what you want? We need will at times, you know what I mean? So it's like, I like to do it in that way when I do astrology, because I do have so many people, when I say like they have a moon in Aries or whatever, they're like, oh, and it's like, no, like, please, let's there. And I'm not sugarcoating everything. There are things that make things more difficult, for sure. There are hard parts of our chart, for sure. But when we know the hard parts, it gives us the opportunity to navigate them. It's
Mm.
information and tools to help us get through the things, right? So it's not taking it to like a Pollyanna, like, oh no, everything's great, everything's good. No, there's tough shit in there for sure. But let's work through it. Let's figure out how to take the strengths and concentrate on them. Because I know we had this conversation a few days ago. I was talking to you about how, like, we are really taught, especially in the United States, that you have to, like, really try hard to make your weaknesses or things that you struggle with better, right? Like,
Mm.
so we were talking about, like, in school, like, you could have really been poor at math, but God, you were amazing at science, and what you got kind of pushed towards is do better in math, like,
Mhm.
get a tutor, do this,
Yeah.
get better. And then, well, what happens to the science that you're really strong in? That's like, well, you're good at that, you got it, you don't really need to work on that anymore. And it's like, but no, maybe you're just meant to really, like, concentrate on science and math isn't your thing. So it's like, it's also taking, like, where your strengths are. So we look at the chart, where are your strengths? Let's work with that. Let's make that part of what you drive yourself with towards purpose. And the areas that we consider maybe harder or weaker, however you want to say it, I always kind of hate those terms, but that's kind of what is used. It's like, be aware of them and learn how to use the strengths to navigate them, but stop wasting time at trying to make them better, and stop
Mm.
wasting time at trying to fix, that aspect of yourself. What
Yeah.
about acceptance? Knowledge can bring you to acceptance as well.
Yeah, I love that because yeah, exactly what you're saying. Like, we are raised in a society that tells us really who we should be, and they like to tell us in a way that's like, no, you have options. You can do math, or you can do science, or you can do
Yeah.
geometry. Like, what are your gifts out of these five things, when there's like a million other things, other gifts that they're like, maybe like you can do that on the weekends, but like, this is where your future lies. And we all get so confused because, first of all, you have to do well in all of them.
Mhm.
So it's not even like, it would make more sense if they were like, oh, science is your thing, move forward with that. But it's like, no, you need all of everything.
Mhm.
But we get so confused even knowing what our strengths are, when that's the way that we're raised, right? We're not raised to say like, okay, what feels good, and focus on that one thing that, lights us up. It's like, it just is so backwards. So I
Yeah.
love that is something that we connected about a couple of days ago. And I love that our chart, that's why connecting to my chart for me has really helped almost solidify the things and remember the parts of me that are like full of purpose and do light me up, and are where I hold all of my passion. And I think it's so, because it's repressed a lot of the time, right? And actually what you were saying earlier about when we judge people, sometimes it's actually a repressed part of us that we're not allowing out. So can you tell me more about like what that looks like, of how to, not necessarily how, but what it would look like to see what your passions are, or maybe your purpose, or what lights you up in that blueprint?
Yeah. So I would say there's something called the big three in an astrology chart, and that is your sun sign, your moon sign, and your rising sign. And I would say that that's probably the best place to start if you're not going to have a professional reading done right away. This would be an area that I would say would be worth investigating on your own and spending time with, because there are so many things to look at in a chart that it can get very overwhelming and very confusing. And there are so many ways that things need to be interpreted that you really need someone who has studied for a while to get. But these three things, the sun, the moon, and the rising sign, can really get you started on your path to moving towards purpose and your passion. So your sun sign is your core identity. It's what you came here to do. It's how you have faith in life. It's how you become your highest self. And then your rising sign is the operating system. It's like the vehicle that'll get you there. It's how you achieve your passion. It's how you approach everything on an everyday basis. It's also what people have shared in astrology as well, as it's how people see you. So sun is like your core identity. It's what you feel inside. It's your inner journey. And then the ascendant is more of rising sign, ascendant. It's the same term. It's more of how others actually see you show up in life. And then your moon is your core needs. It's your emotional fulfillment. It's how you react to things emotionally. It's really kind of what runs the show, right? Because we are such emotionally based creatures. And so if you go into, there's many free ways that you can get your chart online, but you can go to astro.com, it's astro.com, and put in, you'll need this information is very vital, very key. Otherwise your chart won't be correct. You need your birthday. Obviously we all know our birthday, but we need our birth time. And I find that some people actually struggle to find that. And if you do, you can simply order like the long form birth certificate from your state. Or you can look through, if your mom did a baby book, almost always in the baby book is your time of birth.
That's where I got mine.
Yeah, it's a really key thing, because sometimes your moms don't remember, but it's written down somewhere. And also, like, depending on when you were born, you could also even get it from the hospital that you were born at. Usually they have like vital records at the hospital that they've maintained for a period of time, depending on how old you are. And then you'll need the city and state of your birth. And it's very important that that's accurate as well. So like, even though you may have grown up in, say, Yonkers, New York, like that's where I grew up. I wasn't born in Yonkers, New York. I was actually born in White Plains. So you really want actually like where you were the moment you took your first breath as your town, and run that chart and start looking into those big three, the sun sign, the rising sign, and the moon sign, because that will start to give you a really beautiful way to interpret the story of your life and to interpret the blueprints that you are trying to like kind of discover. And then from there, I would say it's really worth investing, getting a reading done, because there are personal planets, Venus, Mercury, Mars, that they have a really big influence also in your personality. They're not probably the most important thing to know right off the bat. Like I said, start with the big three, but they will become very key if you want to go deeper into your journey. And then I also do chart reading that includes different chart readings to go into purpose more. Something called the midheaven. We look at the midheaven. The midheaven is at the top of the chart, and that is kind of like your purpose as far as like what you're here to do out in the world publicly, like what our role is and how we do that role. And then there's house system, there's certain houses in the system that I look at, like the 6th house, the 10th house. There's things that I put together in a reading that give a really deeper story, really like beautiful insight into going towards the path and the purpose, and knowing what your strengths and talents are as well. Knowing how you take action, knowing how you work with others. Like there's parts of the chart that will talk about how you are in relationships and things like that as well. But start with the big three if you want to do it on your own. Look at your sun, moon, rising, and then just hit the books and look at, my core identity. This is, what I'm here to do. And my rising, this is how I'm going to do it. This is the vehicle method. So an example, just to give you an idea, like your core identity is to be a communicator, to be a connector, to share information. And how you do that, your vehicle, your rising sign is Libra. Libra is all about connecting in relationships. So you will use your ability through your rising sign to build relationships as a way to evolve and go deeper into your core identity. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
then your Sag moon, like your core need is a lifetime seeker of all things. You're a lifetime seeker of information, of travel, of deeper meaning, spirituality, self discovery, higher purpose, all of that. So, for you to feel fed, you need to live a life that's very rich and very deep into the knowledge of things, and that journey of always growing, always evolving. And so if you can remember just even those three things, you have a really like beginning understanding of passion and purpose. That was a long answer again. I'm so sorry. I could go
No,
on and on about astrology.
story checks out with that, right? I'm like such a seeker and I always am looking for the next thing, and I'm always taking in information, wanting to share, and how can I utilize this in the best way? And that is so interesting just to hear you say that, because just the way that you explain those big three, I've actually, I should preface this by saying the way that I've understood astrology is
Yeah.
I am very basic in my knowledge. So I'm glad the terminology, everything that you're using, I understand. I'm very basic. I'm sure a lot of people that are
Yeah.
listening or watching this are also very basic in that I understand parts of my chart, but I couldn't quite explain it why, or I couldn't explain it to someone else. But the way that you explain that, especially with using my chart, like with the examples of my chart, just makes so much sense in who I am. And when I feel the most lit up, it is when I'm communicating, it is when I'm connecting. Like connection with people is so, so important to me. And also ingesting and taking in information and being able to share it in a different way. So like my understanding and the way that I communicate it, it's just like, that's all it makes sense. Like that's all what makes me. So yeah,
There's a
thank you.
common thread through your big three of that the communication, the connector, the relationship builder, the information deliverer. Like that is where you are like completely meant to go. And you have a very heavy air chart, and air is all about that. Air is all about the big thinking, the innovation of ideas, and how to it's very much about helping the collective. It's
Mm.
not just about they're not air, it tends to not just be about self, it's about all and
Mm.
the other. So you are living your chart. You didn't even know it, but you're living your chart.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually that makes me think too about the fact that when I mean air, when I first started understanding the qualities of air, like what that means, even with that, there's like the shadows and the light aspects of all of those: air, earth, like I can't even remember the
Fire, water, you got it, you're going.
fire, water,
Yeah.
and it's crazy because it's so easy for us to like compartmentalize all of those things, and the judgment that people have is all like a reflection of ourself, really, when you think about it. And I don't want to bring this back to, I kind of do actually. I want to bring this back a little bit to what we were talking about in going into the dark side of things, because I I think I mentioned this to you, but recently I had an experience where I learned something about a part of my chart, and it wasn't necessarily astrology, but it has to do with astrology. It was in my human design, but I learned a part of my chart that kind of made me rethink everything in my experience in my life. Really quickly, I was able to spring back quickly, but it's this part of me that I learned you have to kind of, I learned to kind of play it safe in a way to, um, because if I didn't, this aspect of my chart could really bring your reputation down, people can kind of go after you. And the only reason that I'm bringing this up is because I think that there are, and I have talked to clients about this as well, there are aspects of our chart that can be kind of scary. And I don't mean that in the way that we have the negative connotations that people say about like, oh, Gemini is like two-faced. It's more, you read something that really doesn't, it's kind of scary. It feels misaligned, or and now that I'm saying it out loud, maybe it's not scary. It's like intimidating that this is really like a part of me. And I don't know if this is something that you have connected with other people, especially with clients about, but being able to understand that our chart is a blueprint for a reason. Like there's no mistake in that. So the aspect that I found for my chart, I realized, that's a part of me in order to live my purpose. I needed that to live my purpose. Let me know if this is making sense to
No, it
you.
makes sense. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So go ahead. Yeah.
No, go finish what you're going to say first.
I was just going to say, like, has that happened with clients? Is that like, how do you navigate that? Because people can get stuck in that when you see a part of your chart that you're like, oh my gosh, that's scary. Like I went down a rabbit hole of looking at stories of people who were similar, had this similar part in their chart, and there was a demise, like there's like warnings. I felt like I was seeing like warning labels, like this could be bad. Like tell me more about that. Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, so a few things. One, first, knowledge is power, right? So if we become aware of an area of our chart that may bring about some type of negative experience, whether it be with others or whether it be a specific area of your life, like say there's an area of your chart where I believe I know what you're talking about, that you kind of found out that you made at times push people to kind of like have a negative reaction and be like take that negativity and reflect it onto you. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's a part of my chart. So I'm a 5/1 in human design. We don't
Yeah,
have to go into human design, but really people project on you,
onto you.
and that's a big part of the 5. And it's people can put a lot of their expectations into you, and you need to live up to this expectation. And once you don't live up to that expectation, or you waver from that, or you often that is actually when you are living in alignment and being your true self, people don't like that.
Yes.
So then they will try and take you down. And
Yes.
that's a very general way to describe it. But yes.
Okay, so with that, so if that comes up in a reading for me, there's a couple of things. First, like I said, knowledge is power. Two is, one, years ago I was in I've trained as a life coach as well, and one of the best statements I've ever learned and carry with me all the time, and it's so simple, is like, whose business am I in? Am I in their business or am I in my own? Because the only thing that I should be in is mine. So others' opinions of me are none of my business. It's a very hard thing to accept. It's a very hard thing to embrace. But when you can and when you do, it's life changing. And it's the truth. It's the only thing that we can control is how we react and we respond to things. It's one of the key things that we learn, in our journeys of self-help and things like that. So knowing that that may be part of your chart where you can at times trigger or have others project, I then look at how your midheaven is, and you are a Cancer midheaven, and Cancer midheavens are the carer of the zodiac. They are they hold containers, they hold space, they are the nurturers, they are the ones that are very empathetic, very much nurturing. So I would say, when, okay, you have this situation that arises where someone is really like triggered by you or projecting like negative emotion, like how can you hold the space for that, for them? How can you put that into a safe container and allow them to work through whatever it is, because it's about their own stuff and not you. You're just mirroring somehow things that are happening internally in that. So I use the chart as a way to teach you when that happens, what you can do to support that experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Just knowing, yeah, like what, okay, if this were true, and
Yeah.
that really takes away the fear then
Yeah.
of, because I think I had like 2 full days of being like, well, I shouldn't share anything, like rethink your whole life. And yeah, I was able to take myself out of that really quick, probably just because of who I am, what I do, and
Yeah.
all of
You
that.
have the tools.
But yeah, I love that. Just like, okay, talking to clients and talking to people by saying, okay, well, if that were the case, then like, what can you do? What is
Yeah.
your responsibility?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's so helpful, because so many people can just be paralyzed in that
Yeah.
place.
And I think it's also, like, we've spoken about this as well. It's you're not for everyone, right? Like, so it's your people finding you and you finding your people, right? And if someone comes in and they're not your person, that projection may happen. And it's like holding the space for them to have the realization that, oh, this just isn't my teacher, or this might just not be my mentor, or this might just not be the work that I feel connected to doing. Like, and carrying them and holding them in that space of that realization too. And being the Cancer midheaven, like I said, that you are, like, that's that gentle approach is how you'll work with that situation when it should arise or come up.
Yeah. I feel like I'm very polarizing, but I've learned to keep that quiet over all of the years of like my life. And now I'm realizing exactly what you said, that, our truth is our truth. So
Absolutely.
what's the point in hiding who that is? You're just going to gravitate the wrong people toward you, and you're going to end up in this place where you feel like you don't know anyone and you're not connected to anyone. And I have been there. So that reminder to keep just being myself. And if people like me, they like me. If they don't, no one needs to like me, but I do know my people are out there.
And
And
their love
yeah,
for you will come.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a really tricky thing in life, because when we fight against who we are naturally, like who we are innately, we fight against like the blueprint of our soul. We get
Mhm.
stuck and we are in mud with our wheels spinning, and we just can't figure out how the hell to get traction. We can't figure out how to get out of this situation, or how to get out of this feeling of being lost and disconnected and uncertain. And it takes work, it takes knowledge, it takes the right mentors, the right teachers, the right guides. It takes a willingness to embrace the light and the shadow parts of yourself. It takes the willingness to do the work, right? So I can give you this information, I can give you the blueprint of your soul, I can tell you what it is that you are here to do, what your gifts are, what your beauty in this journey is. But it's also free choice, right? So it's not, so I'll have people say, well, like, am I destined, like there's no choice in this is just the way it is, and I'm just like, no, there's free choice. This is tools of knowledge that will allow you to better navigate your life. And if you do the work, and if you embrace it, and you stop fighting against these aspects of yourself that you deem unacceptable, or someone else at some point deemed unacceptable, that you've carried with you, you will finally come into fullness. And
Mm.
when you come into fullness, you will fully start to experience life on a different level. It's going through the journey in shutdown mode it's hard. It makes
Yeah.
everything so much
Yeah, like I mean, I talk to so many people that are, and I can even go beyond that and say, I lived so much of my life in this place of everything was so difficult. Like
Mhm.
I knew things should be easier. Like, can't I just figure it out? Like I was like,
What's
no, I
wrong
just
with
can't
me?
figure it out like other people. What is wrong with
Yeah.
me? And it's because you're literally, like what you said, stuck in mud. You're trying to move forward in a way that's not authentic to you. You're trying to do it in someone else's way. And that might be the way that you were raised, or the societal conditioning, the way that we're told to be, which often is not who we are. So once you start to embrace and start to grow in those ways, then you're able to, like, it's really just about alignment. Things start falling into place and things start feeling really good. And yeah, I love that. I keep picturing that, like being kind of stuck in the mud and not being able to move forward, and then being like, oh, I have like traction. This is
Yeah,
all I had to
it's
do,
a
was like get on
gear.
the right track.
There's a gear that actually is for mud. What? Like,
Yeah.
how did
Yeah.
I know this whole time? A funny thing, like before I kind of learned about like my Scorpio moon, I would always be like, why can everybody get over everything so much easier than I can? Like, why do I hold on to like the hurt so much longer? Or why does it take me so much more time to trust? Like, why am I always waiting for the person to betray and things like that? And when I learned the side of me that is my Scorpio moon, I was able to like let go of so much tightness in my heart, because I thought something was wrong with me, because I would see all these people like easily trusting and loving so like freely and everything. I'm just like, what is wrong? Like, why am I so dark? You know, like, or whatever it was. And
Yeah.
I now know, oh, that's just how I navigate. Like, I navigate, I need a little time. I need a little, like, I need to protect my heart a little bit, and that's okay. And when I know that, I'm able to share that with someone who I feel is worthy of coming into my life, where I can say, look, I move more slowly, or look, I need to at times retreat and like protect myself so that I am able to, I'm so sorry, the dog's barking.
It's okay.
So that I am able to move forward feeling safe and comfortable. You know,
Yeah.
so that's an important thing. It also helps with attraction. What do
Yeah.
you
And I love that, like just being able to understand, like, okay, this is part of me. So like, how can I utilize that? Which is very, very cool. Thank you. This has been so, so good. I feel like I could talk to you forever about
think?
so many things.
Yeah, we'll have to do this again. We'll have to bring
Definitely.
back some
Yeah.
more things and more insight to the audience, because
Yeah, especially now that we've created like a little bit of a foundation, and hopefully I highly recommend anyone to did you say where people could download their chart?
yeah, so you can go on to, it's astro.com. It's astro.com, and you can do a chart there, and that will give you, it'll give you the full rundown of things. It'll look very confusing, but just on the paper itself, look for your sun, look for your moon, and then it's going to, it should say AC for ascendant. And
Which
that
is
will, it's
fun.
the first house in astrology. So that'll give you your basics, your big three that I was talking about.
Cool. Ah, that's so amazing. Highly recommend everyone to do that, and just to research. Don't go crazy, because there is so much information out there that it can be so overwhelming. And even as someone who has been into astrology for years, and I know that this is never something, I'm never going to be an astrologer, because I feel the people that, like you, when this is your thing, it's like it just clicks for me. Like my chart clicks for me, but I could never explain this to people. Just slowly go at it. That's like my only piece of advice. Is there anything else that you feel like we need to hear more about, or anything that you feel is missing before we kind of close it off?
I think we covered a lot. Like I said, could go on for probably days about this, so I'll end it at that. But yeah, it's just so worth spending the time and spending the energy that it takes to do the learning about the blueprint, because it really is, it's life changing. Astrology is life changing. It really is.
Love it. Amazing. I wanted to mention that, Andrea, thank you so much. You wanted to offer all of our listeners, watchers, if you're on YouTube, a discount to work with her if you want to go further with your charts. She is offering 33% off, which is a huge discount. So that is so amazing. I'm so happy with the discount code Nearing Wild. You can feel free to please check out her Instagram, her website, Facebook. I'm going to link everything in the show notes. So thank you so much, Andrea, for joining and for just sharing all of your wisdom with me. I've loved this conversation.
Thank you. And thank you to the listeners for letting us kind of just go and riff on our passion and love for astrology and following us along on the journey. And yeah, it's a magical thing. So I hope to meet you all again out on the podcast world and out, in, if you get a reading done and stuff like that. And Jen, this is awesome work that you do. And I absolutely am just so grateful to you. And I feel honored to be your first guest on your podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy it was you. To everyone else, now it is time to put down your phones and get outside. I will talk to you next week.